Today's guest is a guitarist, musician, producer, hockey fan, dad, grandpa, husband, a 2007 inductee into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. He's here today to talk about his brand new memoir, Lay It on the Line, a backstage pass to rock star adventure, conflict, and triumph. It's an honor to welcome to Metal Mayhem RLC, Rik Emmett. Hello, Rik. How are you, man? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yes, it's great to be here.
Listen, I'm sitting in Rochester, New York. We're about 50 miles across Lake Ontario to downtown Toronto. So we're like, geographical buddies. I would like to introduce you to my co-host. He's down in New Jersey, goes by the name of Metal Walt. Walt, say hello to Rik.
Hey, Rick, Metal Wolf from New Jersey. How are you? I'm not as close. I would need a big, long ride up the New York State Thruway all the way up to Syracuse, make a left, and keep going for about 4 hours.
Yeah, I know where these things are, guys. I've played these places many, many times. In fact, like Rochester, we used to do this. Triumph used to go across the top of New York State and do all the war memorials. There was one in Buffalo, then there was one in Rochester, and then one in Syracuse, right? The war memorial auditoriums. And of course, Jersey, oh man, I have a funny story about Jersey. We can tell it later in the show, but and I'll try to figure out how to tell it in public terms because it crosses the line a little bit. But
love it. I have
actually two stories about playing New Jersey, but okay, on we go.
Well, we'll get to that when we take our walk down heavy metal history lane. All right, so Rik, right out of the bat, why the memoir now? Is it just to close the career? Tell us about it.
Well, I retired from the road back in about 2018, and then COVID came and retired everybody else for a while. But my timing was excellent to get off the road, and it just seemed like the Triumph had done the documentary, the Rock and Roll Machine documentary that Banger Films did. Mm-hmm. And I realized that, truth is this thing that's a perspective. Everybody's got their own truth, and the documentary certainly had one that was one that those guys decided to tell, when I'm saying Banger Films. But there were some things where I thought, well, my life has been a lot more complicated than just being in this rock band. And, your question is an interesting one from the point of view of, like, why even bother? Like, I was just reading a thing this morning. Mick Jagger says, I'm never writing a memoir. I live so that I'm worried about what's coming in the future and what I'm doing today. I'm not interested in the past. I'm going to move on. And I get that. I totally get that. But I think your question sort of framed it. There's chapters that you come to the end of and you close the door and then you move on. But sometimes the closing of the door is, for me, I'm a very writerly literate kind of guy, and I felt like, no, I need to write this. I need to find the right words. I need to figure out how I want to say it. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to try and write it well so that it would be something that, my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren might pick it up and read it and go, Grandpa, what a character he was, So there's a kind of a memorializing that you're leaving a legacy, all of those kinds of things. But part of it too is you just want to set the record straight. That's part of it too.
Well, and Rik, it's interesting in the book, like, you cover off on all of your typical chapters, what it was growing up in your family and your youthful years, how you learned to become a musician, the Triumph years, the post-Triumph years, back to Triumph years, the college professor, all that other stuff. But what I found interesting is there's a big equal focus on not just the music, but sort of the trade-off and the stresses that came with it, right? So you describe yourself as a rock star, yet, I'll quote the book, you describe making choices for commercial and not musical success, the friction of having to make career choices versus prioritizing family needs, that search for personal balance, and learning to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, obviously my personal truths that I arrived at living the kind of life that I did, one of them was that I ended up teaching as a college professor for a long time. And I taught music business, I taught songwriting, and I taught career development and all of these kinds of things. Helped kids. You'd sort of function like a mentor helping them produce their records, but also, trying to give them advice about, how you're going to live your life and make choices. And of course, young folks, they have a lot of idealism. And as an artist, I'm 70 years old now. I still have some. I don't have as much as I used to. Don't have anywhere near the ambition that I used to. But I still have that sense of, if life's going to work, you got to kind of light some candles and hold them up in the darkness. Like, there's got to be something that gives you a sense of purpose, so everything I did was like that. And of course, the big thing is I was in a band called Triumph, and it took me a few years to figure it out. But, why did they call the band Triumph? I think Mike and Gil really had no idea. They just kind of thought it was cool, like a motorcycle, like a sports car. Triumph. Yeah, this is going to be great. And I kind of went, no, it's got to stand for something. If you're going to call it Triumph. So the whole thing of Triumph becoming a band that had songs of like inspiration and motivation and self-empowerment and all of those kinds of, long before it was really a meme that existed in the world, Triumph was making tunes like that. And it made it so that it wasn't just guys, in heavy metal, jackets with buttons all over them and crests. And like, we had women coming to shows now. So like that kind of opinion about, the music that we made, it crossed over borders and boundaries. And I was very much that kind of a guy. I didn't want to just be locked into one kind of a thing, So that's my story.
And it's funny, Rick. I don't know if this was intentional, but there's a chapter in the book called the Triumph chapter, like duh. But, you assume Rik Emmett's doing a memoir, right? This is going to be 95% about Triumph, and it actually isn't. Like, the Triumph chapter is only, I think, about 29 pages out of 280. So there's a whole lot more to your life than just Triumph, as it was stated in the book, of course.
Yes, and I appreciate you pointing that out, and that's the truth of it. And I mean, the thing too is, like, the biggest part, and the book makes this point very clear, the biggest part of my life was creativity, and creativity led me to Triumph. And that was a chapter in my life. But that creativity is something that's still ongoing, like, even to sit here now and just do an interview, this is a kind of a creative act. And it's always something that I've found interesting and fun to do. I loved going into school and doing lectures. I loved prepping for classes because it was creative work. So, I mean, I'm still writing guitar pieces and going to be making new albums or recording guitar fingerstyle stuff that's kind of jazzy, So here I am on a metal show and I'm talking about, jazz guitar pieces. But that's kind of the guy that I am. And that's the kind of creative life that I always really wanted. I wanted to be able to take a little bit of this, a little bbit of that, I mean, in my life, there's no more important guitar player than, say, Ritchie Blackmore. Like, he was one of my heroes at a time of my life. And that was the beginnings of metal. And so there is metal in my soul. There's no question that that's a part of who I am. Jimmy Page, there was metal in Zeppelin. They weren't all metal, but there was a fair bit of it there. But of course, when we played at the S Festival, which is one of the stories that I tell in the book, there were all these other bands like Judas Priest and they get up on stage and they're wearing leather and studs and it's 90 degrees in the shade. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm glad I don't have to, I'm glad I'm not that kind of a metal guy. I prefer to be this kind of a metal guy wearing a track shirt, anyhow.
Well, Rick, let me set the record straight. The brand name is Metal Mayhem ROC. It's short for Rochester, New York, but also rock,
Yeah, there you go.
So, this rock heavy metal boulevard has metal lanes in it. And the thing with Triumph, and this is what I loved about Triumph, quick history. I went to school in Toronto. I graduated high school in 1986. I went to school up at Trevis Institute of Recording Arts. And,
oh, yeah.
Okay. And I lived right in the Maples, which was on the building of Maple Leaf Gardens. So here it is. I'm 19 years old, Toronto, Ontario, 1986, going to the gasworks, going to Massey Hall. And the thing with Triumph was, you said a quote about Triumph that it was, well, first of all, you came into Mike and Gil's band, and it was really Gil's band. And how many other bands have a singer as a drummer, a guitarist as a drummer, and you really weren't the stereotypical front man. And it just circles back to the Canadian way. What I'm trying to say is we love Canada, and you aren't metal. You are Triumph. You are a that's what Triumph is. So tell us about being the dynamics of writing with these guys, and because you're the writing force.
Well, Gil was a bit of a writer too when I first joined, and he definitely felt like it was something that he wanted to do. So in the first few albums, there was a concerted effort. Mike was kind of functioning as the record producer. He knew more about the studio than Gil or I did. Yeah. And Mike would sort of diplomatically say, okay, well, we'll have a Rik song, then we'll have a Gil song, then we'll have a Rik song, then we'll have a Gil song, and 50-50 split the lead vocals. And of course, I liked it. To be in a band where you have another singer, it's great. You don't have to rip your throat out singing all night long. You work hard, but then you get a break. So that was a nice way for the band to be able to kind of preserve itself physically over the course of a long, tour, a long career. But I think what happened was by about the third album, the Just a Game album, the songs Lay It on the Line and Hold On became pretty popular at radio. They were kind of the break across. We started to get on AM radio a little bit. So those things started to happen, and I was the vocalist on those songs. And I think it sort of showed that there was an appetite from the general public that if you wanted to break the band wider and become, bigger and more popular, and certainly the record company at the time, RCA, that was their feeling. Their feeling was, hey, get the blonde guy to sing the songs,
Yeah.
Which Mike and Gil weren't keen on when that went down. But the other side of that thing, and another, this facet to your question, Mike and Gil were, as the band started to develop and become more and more successful, they were really having to spend a lot of time and energy being managers. They were having to kind of function as coordinating booking agents and coordinating the marketing and working with the record company. And Mike understood radio promotion way better than most radio promotion guys did. He just had a knack for it. He had a hunger and an ambition for it. Whereas Gil, when it came to large scale productions, honestly, there was nobody in a rock band on the face of the earth that had the level of understanding that Gil did. Gil knew literally how to take PA systems apart and put them back together, lighting systems, genie lift towers. He understood all that. And Gil was the kind of guy that loved doing shit like, I'll cut a deal with a truck driver and we'll buy a truck. And we'll own our own truck. So in the early days of the band, we had a tractor trailer. We were pulling up to the gas works with a tractor trailer truck. And people were going, what is this band? Like, in the documentary, Larry Gowan talks about the band declaring itself above all the other bands, because that was kind of Gil's attitude that, Mike, he adopted it really quickly and easily. The two of them had a mindset that was like, no, this is what this band's going to be. We're going to rule the world, and, we're going to do it our way. So that was like, I was junior partner, but then, I was writing the songs that were starting to happen. I went, oh, this is my role. This is what I can contribute. This is who I can be. But of course, as time goes on, egos get in the way, and, everybody wants to be a rock star once you have a taste of it,
You mentioned that, and I've read somewhere, I'm not sure where, that when the band came around in the early mid-70s, you were taking a little bit of like the theatrics of Cooper and Kiss and this and that. Did the dual writing pull from your love of the Beatles, where they all sang? Kiss, you had Gene and Paul, all four of them singing. It almost expanded the brand. And did those bands that I just mentioned have anything to do with both of you writing and singing?
Oh, absolutely. I think in the very early stages of the band, when we were just a bar band, we were playing a lot. We had a couple of Led Zeppelin medleys. We had a Jimi Hendrix medley. We had a Deep Purple medley. So the common ground was really those bands. But if you sort of looked a little deeper and beyond it to each guy's tastes, there was a common ground. Like Gil loved Grand Funk, and he loved Mark Farner, and he just loved the way that guy sang and stuff. And you could hear it in his voice. Gil loved Bad Company and Paul Rogers, and that bluesy kind of quality is something that Gil he gravitated towards. And when he wrote, you'd hear it in the stuff that he did. I wasn't as bluesy. I had blues, it's not like I hadn't cut my teeth listening to, the English guitar players had sort of reinvented American blues and given it back to a younger generation. And so then through, Beck and Page and Clapton, we were finding our way back to, Albert King and the Cotton Blues Band and that Mike Bloomfield. Like there was stuff that I got to hear because of the group of musicians that I was with. So that was common ground for me and Gil. Like I could speak that language and musically I liked to play there. I didn't want to have to stay there because you mentioned the Beatles. I mean, I was huge about the Beatles. I liked vocal bands in the end more than I liked, hard rock bands that were about groove. I liked tunes. I liked songs. I liked, and I eventually got to a progressive period in my life. I was listening to Yes and King Crimson and Gentle Giant and, Return to Forever. And, my brain was expanding in ways. I don't think Gil and Mike ever really got there. They were pretty happy with the roots they had.
I wouldn't call some of your classic, Hold On, Lay It on the Line sappy, but they were more singing rather than the hard rock. And you're right, Gil handled some of that early stuff, the hard, when the light or Lay It on some of the earlier stuff was more.
Yeah, when the lights go down, and but even earlier than that, Street Fighter, and there were riff rock tunes that he'd write a riff, and he'd sing it into his dictaphone. So it'd be like he would say, "Here's a song I've been working on," and I would listen to this little tape that would be going like na 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 na. I go, "Yeah, it sounds like Deep Purple. It's good, Yeah, I can work on that. We'll work it up." And so he was that kind of a guy that he liked that kind of riff rocking stuff, and hey, that was right up my alley. I said earlier, Blackmore was kind of Deep Purple, like, wow, they blew my mind. I thought that was the greatest rock band ever. When I was a teenager, you were living in in Toronto and going to Trebas in your era. Back in my era, I would do things like climb the car and I would drive to Detroit to see Hendrix or go up to Montreal to see Deep Purple. Like I'd get on the train and I'd go on up to Montreal to see Deep Purple play at the Montreal Forum. And I just thought they were the greatest rock band on the planet Earth, But you're a teenager, right? Like you're discovering the world, right?
We'll talk to this guy. Metal Walt's a huge Purple head.
I'm 53 and I love Deep Purple, and I didn't even got a chance to see them till 1991 when they had Joe Lynn Turner in the band. But still,
oh man,
still,
I saw them at St. Lawrence Market in Toronto one time, and Ian Gillan was not in a happy mood. And Blackmore was even worse, like foul black mood. And he had about 6 or 7 strats, and he would be playing one, and he just beat the shit out of it, like the whammy bar. And eventually he would throw it down on the ground and be kicking it and stomping on it and playing the whammy bar with his foot. And a roadie would scurry out and bring him a new one. And Richie had, straight over his shoulder and plugging it. And the one that was on the floor with parts flying off it, the roadie would grab it and run it back and start trying to reassemble it. And there were about 6 or 7 of these guitars that were in a constant stream from Richie's chest down to the floor, over to the roadie's bench, back onto the top of the amp. And Richie was just destroying these guitars. And it was one of the greatest nights of my life. I go, oh, this is great,
That is awesome. That is a great story. Rik, I was thinking about this too. Early in the book, you use the words it and play that become an important part of who you are as a person and your persona as an artist. And I guess in a sense, as you were describing the experience from MCA and the RCA lawsuit, and in a way, that's when you became a bit let's say, disenfranchised from, let's say, what you call the Three Musketeers and the big rock and roll machine. And that's in a way where you almost sort of mentally started planning your exit from Triumph, correct? And it wasn't because it was no longer about like why you signed up to be a musician to begin with, right?
Yeah. And you know, I mean, I think for you to describe it as saying that I was planning my exit, like that would be way too, that's not what was happening. Certainly what was happening was I was considering, ooh, what if I had to leave? Like, what if this, you know, what if this keeps going the way that it's going? Like, how would I get out of this? So it was a much fuzzier, grayer cloud than having like, all right, I've got to plan my exit. Like, you know, I mean, even when it got right down to the end in 87, 88, I was still feeling like, is there some way that I can rescue it? Is there some way that we can save this? You know, like, how might I be able to reinvent it? But I couldn't see a way to do it. But yeah, I mean, you know, as I mentioned earlier, this whole thing about feeling constricted or boxed, you know, I don't mind it when the idea is to say, okay, it is going to be creative play. That's what it's going to be. And that's going to be the priority all the way down the line in everything that we do. And in Triumph, one of the best things about the band was that we shared this sense of humor. The three guys, it was like, isn't this surreal? This is bizarre that our lives are like this. Isn't this great? So we always had a kind of a lightheartedness within this, you know, tremendously serious business that you've got record contracts and you've got merchandising deals and you've got tours that you've got to go out and play on, and they seem like they're never going to end. And, you know, there's all of this stuff that's going on that locks you into a box. But if you feel like, well, there's lots of air holes, you know, there's somebody put a vent in the roof, I'm all right. You know, I'm not going to suffocate here. But I would feel it if the focus was no longer about that creative play, the fun we're going to have. We're going to go in the studio, we're going to have songs and make records, and we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be great. You know, it's going to be play. You know, we're going to play. And I live for that. So, you know, as a musician, I want that moment where I'm not even in my own head anymore. I'm inside the music and I'm playing, you know, and I'm not sure that Gil and Mike had the same, I don't know, religious, spiritual experience that I had when it came to, you know, maybe they did, but maybe the business maybe it hammered it out of them after a while. You know, I'm not sure. You know, we had our moments, and some of them were glorious. You know?
Hey, Rik, on that point too, you know, and I love this about your book. When you get away from the musical side, there's a lot of emphasis on family in your book. I mean, you give the biggest accolades to your wife of 47 years, Jeanette. I mean, your 4 kids, your grandkids now. There's even a funny line in there where I think something about it took maybe 6 or 7 years of your career before your dad finally said, I guess this music thing's working out for you, okay? But ultimately, when, you know, family's a big thing for you, but ultimately when it did come time to, let's say, resurrect Triumph for Sweden Rock and Rocklahoma, it was your brother Russell who was the catalyst to kind of say, all right, Rik, it's time to give up the ghost here. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no question that when Triumph came apart, and when I left it, there was a lot of negativity and there was a lot of bad blood. And then lawyers argued with lawyers for years and years and years. And it took me, I don't know, 7 or 8 years to get a settlement. And even then, it was, you know, no one's ever happy when there's a divorce settlement. You know, it's like, then I carried around resentments and anger and you know, a lot of negativity. And so my brother, he got cancer and you know, it was stage 3.5, you know, stage 4. But he was the one that sort of, you know, sat me down, and we're having one of those conversations that you have, which is, you know, putting your affairs in order, all of these kinds of things. And he said, you know, you carry around a lot of baggage, and you should really try to fix it. And I go, I thought we were talking about you.
Yeah.
I didn't think we were talking about me. I don't think it's fair to turn this around on me. He goes, this is kind of about me too, because I want you to try and do this for me. This is something from a legacy point of view. I'd really like to see you, because my brother Russell was as big a Triumph fan as there ever was. You know, nobody liked it more than him, that he would get a limo sent to his house to pick him up and take him down to a gig at Maple Leaf Gardens, or, you know, down in Buffalo or whatever. And he loved it. And he and I were very, very close. I mean, there's pictures in the book where you can see we played in softball leagues together, and you know, we were tight. And so when he made the request, I went, well, okay, I got to do this. I got to do this for him, you know. And I think Mike and Gil appreciated the fact that here wasn't this, you know, son of a bitch guy that had fought with them for years coming back. Here was this guy that was coming back because he had a younger brother that was in a bad place, that was making this happen for Mike and Gil, like, you know, that we were all going to benefit from this. So Russell was coming from the right place for the right reasons, and that made it easier for us to sort of say, okay, put down your weapons. Let's peace.
Rik, let me ask you, what were you angry at? What were you resenting? The fact that the Musketeers, that bond you guys had, was being broken? Because Gil and Mike, it was just the end of that era. The formation of Triumph was so special. Was it the fact that you're finally like a different stage of your life, 87, 88? I don't know what the exact age was, maybe late 30s. And you're like, man, I'm really turning into a real adult. Was it that bond was not there? What was the anger and resentment?
I was 34, 35, like in 88. I'm born in 53. So yeah, 35 years old. And part of it was that, to answer your question about, what was the big thing emotionally behind the anger, I think it was because I felt like the spirit of the band, the reason for the band, the heart of the band had been betrayed. And so I felt there was a betrayal there. And, I look back on it now and I realize, well, nobody was getting any younger. Everybody had families and kids. And in fact, Gil, his marriage was dissolving and coming apart. His dad died, and that put him in a really bad place. And he'll admit, he'll say, hey, I wasn't even in my right mind. And he wasn't. He was making decisions. And part of it was they were business decisions that, I absolutely 100% didn't agree with, but I would get outvoted. And so there was a frustration there that like what I considered to be common sense reason was not being listened to. There were business practices that, I thought, man, this is kind of going beyond the pale here. Like I can't live with this, So I felt like I don't have a choice here. I've got to give my notice, and this is going to be horrible because the financial implications, the consequences are going to be disastrous. But at a certain point, and maybe I say this in the book, I can't remember, but it's not about money anymore. There's certain decisions you make in your life, and they can't be about money. If you're always making your decisions based on money, then, I think you're betraying the spirit of what the best stuff of life is supposed to be about, which is, play and music and love and family and all of these other kinds of things. So
without, showing shade on anyone, what'd you think about when Phil X joined the band briefly? And nothing against Phil, because he's great in his own work, but to come into Triumph, he even admitted it in the documentary. It's like, what am I doing here? I wouldn't even want to see me. What was your take on that whole period?
Well, there was a guy named Jim Norris who used to run Canadian Musician magazine. He put together a guitar seminar, and I think it would have been 89, maybe the year after, and Phil had just come into the thing. And Phil was going to be at this guitar workshop thing too. So I was going to be there, and Jim said to me, "Are you okay with this?" I said, "I'm fine, totally fine with it. Yes, absolutely, no problem." And when we got there, I went up to Phil and I shook his hand and I said, "Phil, there are only two guys on the planet Earth that know what you're stepping. I know what you've stepped into, and you know what you're in now."
Yeah.
And so I have, complete respect for you, and you have I wish you absolutely the best of luck, because only I know what it's like to be in your shoes. And I go, it's not going to be easy, man. But he's a good guy, Phil. He's a tremendous guitar player. He's an unbelievably great guitar player. But I think that's a tough thing, the spirit of Triumph embodied in the songs that I wrote and the songs that I sang. Clearly, he was not going to be able to fill that void, and there's very, I don't say this to be self-aggrandizing, but I just think it's a really, how many guitar players that are, world-class rock guitar players sing the way that I sing? Hardly any. How many singers that sing the way that I sing can play guitar at the level that I play it? Like very, very few. So that was, why would RCA want to sign the band to a record deal? Is because they go, hey, this is a kind of a unique talent here. I think we want to give this guy a chance to be making records. He deserves the opportunity to do it. So there's not a lot of folks like that. You might find in any big town, you might find two or three that are, that are capable on that level. Singer, guitar player. But now there's a third element. How are they at writing tunes? Because you got to be a songwriter too, because that's part of that's the fuel that drives the industry on any level, Like I just watched the thing on the Everly Brothers the other night, and there was a quote from Chet Atkins, and somebody asked him and said, "Hey, Chet, what is the Nashville sound? What is that sound?" And Chet puts his hand down into his pockets and he jingles his coins, and he goes, "You hear that? That's the Nashville sound." And the truth of the music business, no matter what kind of music you play, you got to sell records. You got to sell tickets, And I think that was a hard thing for Triumph to have to try and replace, and dare I say it, probably impossible, because I was the history there. Hold on, lay it on the line, magic power, fight the good fight, never surrender. Like that, those were the evergreen tunes. I wrote every one of them,
The reason they were so great was because it was only you could sing it, and because you put so much of Rik Emmett into it. Even just watching those videos, just the look of your face and your eyes, it's like, forget it, man. Hold On is timeless.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. I am I'm gonna do a shout out to a few folks. Like, for example, Tommy Shaw would have been a great guy because he could have sung and played. Like Tommy he's capable of it, But there aren't that many, You can kind of one hand, Like there's not that many guys that can sing that high, hit those notes. The guy in Zebra, I can't remember his name offhand.
Randy Jackson.
Yeah, there's your man. Like that, yeah, like. That guy could have done it, but he had his own thing. Why would he want to leave the Zebra thing to come over and join Triumph?
So
yeah, there's a few guys.
Have to be a thin white guy with blonde hair. That's the prerequisite.
No. I would definitely not. If they could have found a really hip chick that like a female guitar player that it might have worked, but. By the time a female guitarist has reached that level, she's already got her own record deal. She's already happy. She's not going to leave her thing to come over and join Triumph,
And Rik, you're also forgetting to call out one of your other best attributes, which you mentioned in the book is about, and hopefully I could say this word right, that you are dextro-sinistral.
That's it. Yeah, dextro-sinistral, yes. Yeah.
So tell us what that means.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm naturally left-handed. So in the sense that gross motor control, if I was going to hammer a nail, I would use my left hand. If I was going to throw a baseball, whatever, left-handed. But if I'm going to write with a pen, I use my right hand. So fine motor control was my right hand. When I picked up a fork to eat, I would use my right hand. So my brain kind of has both hemispheres doing different kinds of things. Now, I'm not, it's fairly unique. There are about 10 people in 100 are left-handed, and about 1 out of 10 are dextro-sinistral. But this thing that I just said about watching the Everly Brothers last night, one of the Everly Brothers was left-handed, and his father absolutely insisted that he learn how to play right-handed. And so he was a left-handed guy playing guitar that way. And they had Waddy Wachtel doing, talking about and he's a left-handed guy that plays right-handed. Like, I think Blackmore was a left-handed guy that played right-handed. It's not that uncommon because these guys, you rise quickly because you have this strong hand on the fretboard. It gives you a kind of an advantage. So, yeah, that's true.
It's a cool little fact. I mean, let's be honest. That was the real reason you got the big record label deal.
They go, there's something wrong with his brain. I think we should hire him. He's damaged goods.
Don't worry. His songwriting, his singing, his good looks, his guitar playing, that's all secondary, guys. Hey,
okay.
Rick.
I wanted to tell you a Jersey story now. Can I tell you a Jersey story?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Jersey story.
Okay. So we're playing the first big rock gig ever in the Meadowlands. So the building's been built out in the middle of the swamp somewhere. And, here we come. And it's a big gig. I think we got a Japanese band called Loudness is on the bill, but Mountain is on the bill. And see, I remember this gig because of Leslie. So we're backstage, and Leslie comes to me, and he's got, a voice like this. Hey, Rick, I got something for you, man. I got a present. And he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a guitar knob, and it's a DiMarzio guitar knob, and he puts it in my hand. It's a cream. I still have it in my collection. But it goes to 11. It's a Spinal Tap guitar knob, goes to 11. And he goes, Spinal Tap, it goes to 11. And Leslie was so clever. I was never going to forget the guy because this thing made him absolutely, totally unique. And then when it was like, so how long are we going to let a Mountain play? I go, oh, fuck, let him play for an hour and a half. I don't give a shit. Leslie's great. Let them do whatever they want to do. Okay, so the B part of this story is we've got a guy named Jeff Crump as our road manager. And Jeff had trained under a promoter out in the Midwest, United States, and Colorado, and that neck of the woods. And he was a very officious, ball busting kind of dude, right? And so one of the things that he would routinely do is he would go out and he would count the seats, just do a rough count based on the what the promoter had given him as a seating chart. He would go out and he would count the seats in the house. And if there was a whole section of seats, it wasn't on the manifest. It wasn't on the thing. And so he calls the building manager and the promoter's rep together, and they stand there on the floor of the hall, and he goes, hey, there's a whole section of seats up there that they're not even on the seating plan. What is this? And the guy they look at each other, right? And the building manager goes, well, those are Frank's seats. And he goes, Frank's seats? He goes, what do you mean? He goes, Frank Sinatra. And he goes, oh, because it's Jersey, and there's unions, and somebody's got to be sort of making sure that the peace is being kept by a certain, and so you just go, oh, okay. Now, this was a fairly common, I don't want to make it sound like Jersey's a horror. Every place you go, there would be a couple of extra, rows of seats on the floor, and the promoter wasn't telling anybody about him until the road manager counted him and goes, oh, okay, yeah, you caught me. All right, yeah. That this kind of shit would go on all the time. But anyhow, that's why I'll never forget the Meadowlands in New Jersey, because
Rick, that arena's, I don't know if you know this, the arena is still there. It's now embodied in a shopping mall, and they can't take it down. So it's like the ghost of the Meadowlands arena lived there. That's where I saw all my first shows and everything back in the day. But Rick, I have now my story to tell you about, something that happened at a Rik Emmett show at BB King's in New York City that had nothing to do with the show itself. But you're a good sense of humor guy, and you're going to love this story. So May of 2007, we go to BB King's. We see a great show. It was awesome. I'm with two of my buddies. My one buddy who does not drink, he decided to get to the show late, and he had an empty stomach. And for the yayas, we go out and we have a couple beers afterwards. And he decides to order one of these fancy martinis. Now, the guy doesn't drink. He has nothing on his stomach. And next thing you know, we can't find him. And he's driving the car. I go find him in the bathroom in the basement. It's now like midnight. And I say to him, Mark, what's wrong? Lance, I got sick. I'm throwing up here. I'm drunk. It was that martini. So next thing you know, we're like, well, give us the car keys. We'll drive home. No worries. It's a Wednesday night now, mind you. And guess what? He's driving a stick shift. And my buddy and I don't know how to drive a stick shift. So we now had to roam around the city till 4:30 in the morning on a Wednesday night for him to sober up so we could get home.
Jesus.
So that will ever be labeled the Rik Emmett night. And I told him I was going to talk to you, and I could tell he's probably like, fuck, this guy's, he's going to bring up the story about the martini.
Everybody's got to have stories, man. Everybody's got to have a legend. And you know, your worst moments are also going to be as legendary as your best. So tell them, I appreciate that. I've had a few of those nights myself where you're calling Ralph on the great white telephone and because you've had a little too much to drink. And did he manage to stay sober enough to catch most of the show? Or
we saw the show sober. We went out for those couple of drinks afterwards. It was a long day the next day. But hey, Rick, I didn't want to forget to ask you too. Going back to the reunion about Sweden Rock and Rocklahoma, I was in attendance at Rocklahoma. So I'm one of those rare guys that I was maybe a little bit too young to see Triumph, even at the Metalheads. But I said, you know what? I got to be here. And I went down there. And of course, it was a great night. But talk a little about your experiences at Sweden Rock and Rocklahoma with the tornado.
Yeah, that was a bizarre. I mean, both of the things were kind of weird. Sweden, it was like, why were we going to Sweden? Why didn't we just play on our hometown? Why did we have to go all the way to Sweden? Well, part of it was just that was the offer that was on the table, and it was one of those offers that you couldn't refuse. And so then the agent says, well, don't just go out and play one. I can put you on the Rocklahoma bill. Do you want to play Rocklahoma? And we went, okay, well, that one we could fly our kids to, in Gil's case in particular, he wanted his kids to see him playing in a band, So, because they'd never seen him. So, Rocklahoma, yeah. The first of all, there was a tornado the night before, and it'd be, I don't know, knock down a few tents and move some shit around on the site, and Lord knows what had happened. But that was the night before, and then when we were going over there, the guy that's our limo driver, he's driving along the highway, and the state police pull him over because he was speeding in our limo, and we're in the back seat of the limo, and then the cops. He doesn't have a valid driver's license. And so the cops are going to arrest him. And then we're thinking, well, we're going to be late. We had to do a press conference before we were going to go on. So we were late for the press conference. We wanted to get there. And we started to climb out of the car. And the state trooper, typical guy in those, flat hats, the Stetsons. And he goes like, hey, boy, where do you think you're going? It's like, we got to get another car. He goes, you can't get out of the car. You get back in that car right now. I was, oh, okay, geez, So we have to so we're sitting in the car, going, oh, geez, what's going to happen? On the cell phones, trying to call road managers and trying to call Ed. So eventually, the police literally cuff the guy and take him into their car. And we have to wait for a car to come and get us, and then have to ask permission. Is it okay for us to get out of the car and change into another car? Yeah, all right, you guys can go now. But so that is my strongest memory of how it all got started. The gig itself, I remember it was a really, really hot day, and I remember Night Ranger was on before us, and I know some of the guys in the band, right? And that Jack Blades, the bass player, he was wearing leather pants. And I was thinking, Jack, not a good choice. And then literally I'm watching from the side and I can see they bring out one of those plastic Rubbermaid garbage pails full of ice water. And Jack would come over periodically and stick his head into the thing and then whoosh, shoot his hair back and then run back out on stage in order to try and cool himself off because they were running around in, 100-degree Oklahoma weather. And yeah, so, but they were great. Terrific band. And I think Brad Gillis might have been back in the band at that point. I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not. Joel Huckster plays with them sometimes, and Joel's a fantastic guitar player, one of my favorite rock guitar players. But a great band, and the there's a drummer that sings, Kelly Keegan, right? Yep. So Kelly, we've done some. I like Kelly. So anyhow, I have strong memories of watching those guys play. What else about that gig can I tell you? Oh, we had many malfunctions, but pot lights, flash pots that blew off at the wrong time, and the mirror ball came down at the wrong time. When I was trying to do my Hold On acoustically, they had somebody's metronome from a click track thing on a feed that was coming back through my monitor on stage, and my monitor alone, that was going like tick, 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 tick. And I'm trying to play doodle-dee dingle doodle, doodle-dee dingle doodle. Music holds the secret. Tick, 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 tick. So it was like, okay, this is some concentric circle of hell, I'll survive. Shut off this part of your brain and just use this much of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we're just considerate of your time. Jeanette has a whole honeydew list for you. You got to get back to your work. But next week's going to be 3 years since the passing of Eddie Van Halen. And one of the highlights of your career, your touring career, was the US Festival performance. We had Gil Moore on the show earlier this spring when Triumph was releasing that 40th anniversary package. And he shared a story about you guys were playing. Well, what was it? They were playing in Tampa, and then they had to fly right over to the US Festival. It was hot as hell. People were partying. You guys share your experience. One, if any experience with Eddie Van Halen. And two, that whole day of the US Festival. And three, put the rest of this rumor that you're possibly going to join the damn Yankees.
Okay. So my memory of the US Festival, it was just another gig, but it was one where we flew across the country. We played with ZZ Top in Florida on a multi-act thing, and then flew across, and now we were going to have to do the US Festival gig, and we were on at 4:00 in the afternoon or something, 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And I felt like, Judas Priest was on before us, and Scorpions were on after us. And I was thinking, that's quite the sandwich to be in, But to mention Eddie, no, I didn't have any interaction with him at all in person ever in my life. Mm. But his legend, just the whole reputation of Eddie loomed so large. When I was getting ready, warming up to go on stage, and we were picking out the set list, and and we only had to play for about an hour, and but I want the guitar solo. The guys wanted me to put the guitar solo in the show that would normally be in the middle of Rock and Roll Machine. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to do a guitar solo on the same stage that Eddie Van Halen is going to be on shortly, within a couple of hours. And I went, I sure hope I have a good day, because, the most important electric rock guitar player on the planet Earth is going to be up here later. And, so in a way it was like, psychologically, Eddie was kicking my ass. They were in their compound partying hard, yeah. and Valerie Bertinelli was his wife. And so, the Hollywood film and TV actors and actresses were coming and going, and David was in his glory. They had press conferences, and, a lot of party favors had been consumed in different ways. So,
allegedly.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy day, but, we were just all business. We were just trying to make sure that we kept our heads down and played a good show. And I wanted to, I did have a good day that day. I managed to, and I do thank Eddie for the fact that it was like, well, I knew he was going to be on that stage, and I thought, man, I better do something that, I can be proud of. I can't be Eddie Van Halen, but I can be me. So I'll try and be the best me that I can. And it worked out pretty good. Our Live at the US Festival DVD, it did all right. Now, the damn Yankees rumor. Let me see. How shall I deal with this? I was going through a period where I'd left Triumph and I put out a record on my own, but then the record label Charisma had gone bankrupt, and so I was kind of floating. Who knew what was going to happen in the States? So I started getting some calls, and part of it was because I think we'd shopped the Absolutely album, my Absolutely album, the first one I made when I left Triumph. We shopped that to John Kolodner at Geffen, and he'd passed on it, but then he knew that I was kind of out and around in the mix. And so he would start maybe recommending me to different bands or managers. And so I think Bud Prager had something to do with Damn Yankees. I can't remember if that's the truth of it. Or maybe he was maybe managing Ted, and then Ted was going to go into this Damn Yankees thing, and they were just fishing around. Jack phoned me. Jack Blades called me. I don't think Tommy called, but I think Prager called me, and Jack called me and said, "Hey, we're putting this band together." And I said, "Well, who's going to be in it?" And he said, "Well, I got Tommy Shaw, and I got Ted Nugent." And I go, "Wait, hold it. You already got more guitar players."
Yeah,
I've stayed Ted Nugent. I know that there's a sonic assault that's going to exist there. You don't need another guitar player, And in any case, I didn't really want to be joining another band. Like, I'd had enough of bands. I wanted to be sort of, even if I was going to be living in a smaller world with smaller ambitions and I wanted to sort of be my own boss and run my own house and not necessarily be partnered up with guys that already had a pretty strong understanding of how they were going to run their house and their partnerships and stuff. Like, I thought, man, what's it like when you're sitting around with Ted and you're talking about, the merch deal? Like, what's Ted like when he's having those kinds of questions? Does he keep a firearm on the table when those questions, So I don't know.
A perfect example, less is more. I'm gonna let Walt wrap this up. I just want to ask you quickly, Rochester, New York. You mentioned the Rock. Yeah, you've played the Rochester Auditorium, the Rochester War Memorial. I personally saw some of those shows. I saw you down at the old Rochester Festival tent. You were there.
Yeah. It
was 87. It was a solo show. And I think you had, correct me if I'm wrong, did you have a girl saxophone player or something? Or am I?
I did. No, Colleen Allen, and she was fantastic. She was, what a breath of fresh air that was. I mean, I was looking to break the molds, right? So people thought of Rik Emmett and Triumph, and they thought of, a hard rock, big extravaganza. And so when I put a band together, I went, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a female sax player that can help sing high harmonies, that can, play sax lines and change the nature. And Colleen could play flute and soprano sax. And so, you could get all these different voice things that would happen inside the music. And of course, the problem was that, I also added a second guitar player and a keyboard player. And by the time I was finished, 6-piece band, well, she needed her own room. And then the guys in the band were going, hey, I need my own room too. How come she gets her own room? You go, well, for obvious reasons, you idiots,
Yeah.
But so I got too expensive. Eventually I had to let that band go, but she was great.
Well, I guess all that Young Street Bradors and hash oil didn't burn the Vernomatic's brain too much. So, hey, Rick, thanks for spending the hour with us. Again, the book, Lay It on the Line, A Backstage Path to Rockstar Adventure, Conflict, and Triumph. I appreciate it, and let Walt bring this in for a landing. Thanks, my man.
Thanks,
so Rick, before I let you go, one of the really good things that popped out of the book was I'm a massive New York Islanders hockey fan. I know you're a hockey fan, and it was candy to my mouth when I saw that you guys played Nassau Coliseum May of 1983, the day after they eliminated Wayne Gretzky and the Edmonton Oilers. So that was like, yeah, man, Rick was there. He got the vibe of Nassau and the Islanders.
Yeah, you can imagine, never mind the building itself, the parking lot, how it stank. because the tailgate party that had gone, then you get in the building. There were some guys that they'd never gone home. They just stayed and partied. And then, we got tickets for Triumph. And so they made it like a whole 2-day event. And it was something, man. It was usually when Triumph would play a building at the end of the night after the show was over, because we blew off so many flash pots and had flamethrowers and dry ice and stuff, and never mind the amount of dope that people in the seats would smoke. The building would be this hazy, foggy, thing after when we were leaving. But in this case, when we arrived there at the Long Island Coliseum, it was already, the smoke was already sort of wafting out of the windows and the doors of the place. And it was, the whole parking lot looked like people had been spilling beer and, taking a leak. It was crazy. But, and what a hockey team that was. Trottier and Bossy and Potvin. Oh, man. That was a great hockey team.
It's all come full circle for me, Rick. I was a 13-year-old boy, probably didn't go to school the next day. And here I am 40 years later talking to you about the gig that you played the day after. It's all come full circle. But Rick, this has been we could go on all day. The book is awesome. So where can we find all out about Rik Emmett and the book and everywhere about your information? Where can we find out about it?
Well, the book was published by ECW Press. So, they got a website and they got a thing. But of course, you can just go to Amazon and find the book, I do like, and the publishers like me to say this when I do this pitch, everybody, there's independent booksellers that are in and around your neighborhoods. And those mom and pop places, they require people to be community spirited if they're going to survive. So, it doesn't hurt to go down to your local bookstore. And if they don't have the book, say, hey, will you order me in a copy? And I'd like to get one for my uncle. Oh, and my cousin, Jimmy. And, that would be a good thing, because I think the whole idea of the writing of books and the reading of books, in spite of the fact that we're in a digital age, I think it's still important to our humanity.
Amen.
Absolutely. Well, Rick, this has been a great conversation, and we hope to speak to you again down the line, or maybe see you down in New York City or Rochester at some point, if you ever get the guitar out and get up to the Iridium and play, or somewhere like that.
All right, guys. Yeah. Don't hold your breath, but yeah, okay. But when my jazz guitar record comes out, get all the metalheads to buy it.
Sounds great.
Well, we'll share it. We'll look for it. Thanks.
Good.
Man. Enjoy your day, bud.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Good luck with the shed.
Metal for life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.